We should be streaming live now on YouTube. Welcome to our YouTube audience. Again, my name is Carrie Donegan, and you're watching Radical Age Reversal, a show about longevity and living a long, happy, and vital life. We're doing a series that we kicked off in 2024 called Growing Up Instead of Growing Old. And last week, we took a deep dive into our time and how to audit your time for maximum joy and happiness. And today we're going to turn to one of the other pillars of life, which is money. And we could have addressed this from a lot of different angles, but today what I want to do is maybe look at money in a grown up way, sort of in a different way. One of the ways you can look at money is actually to reverse engineer it. What is your goal and how are you going to get there? So, money, as many people think of it, is a means to an end. And if that's you, I want you to just take a moment and think about how money comes into your life and how you then allocate it for that purpose. So, are you someone who looks at the goal in mind? Maybe you set a weekly goal, a monthly goal, an annual goal. What is it that you dedicate your money to? And I think beginning with the end in mind is a grown up way to look at money. Sometimes I talk to people and again, this is not a podcast where you're going to get financial advice, where I'm going to give you the ins and outs of how to build wealth or create wealth. I want to go kind of to the deeper meaning of money in your life to kind of explore how you look at it, how do you utilize it so that you can have a grown up view, whatever that view is, and move it forward into your life. So, grown up versus growing old. A lot of people who don't look at the end in mind, right? We're calling that the last chapter of life in this beautiful story that we write. We really want that last chapter to be a grand finale, right? We spend a lot of time with young kids investing in their future, right? But what is the future and how does that future look? And this is beyond retirement. And I will do a sidestep and say if you're planning for retirement, also you want to plan for disability. Because one of the things that we're seeing in the world is that if you can't achieve a lifestyle of longevity, a lifestyle where your health span meets your lifespan, you will need help. And the medical system is quite cumbersome and it can be extremely expensive. And so you need to really sit down and think about the choices that you're going to make. We hope here at the show that you'll be able to achieve longevity, which includes health span, so that you won't have to manage that disabled part. But it's always good to plan for it. If it never comes, you have extra ready there, cushion for you to enjoy that last chapter of this beautiful story that is your life. I'm thinking about some of the things that have come across my mind when I'm thinking about money in a grown up way. So, what does that mean? It means that I listen to young people and their stories about money. Sometimes they chase a trend or they chase the person who's next to them, right? If they have the latest gadget, I want the latest gadget. If they're going on this trip, I want to go on this trip. And what you realize if you're in that zone, which is a very young way to kind of look at your money, right? It's not a grown up way. You're not expanding your outlook. What happens is someone else is driving where your finances are going, and they're not really tied to your own belief system. So, in the process of growing up, which is part of longevity, and again, I realize that those words grow up can be totally loaded for people. So, please go back to our first episode where we unpacked that phrase so that you can see what our intention is here. Our intention is to talk about actually expanding into the best possible person that we can be. It's not a space of judgment, it's a space of joy and abundance. And to that regard, we're going to dive into our talk about money today. But I did want to go back and tell you a couple of, you know, fun stories. So this young person I know went to Italy where they play these games of chance on the street. And just as if you were going into a casino or playing poker with friends at home, games of chance often favored the house. But sometimes we can kind of get this young, naive idea that we figured it out. We can figure out where that easy money is. And this young person lost €100 and they were very dismayed because they felt stupid and they felt like they were taken advantage of. And honestly, it was a good time for reflection. So I want you to think of the time in your life where you really feel like maybe in a money situation you were taken advantage of. And ask yourself, does that play into how money affects you now? Because sometimes those moments in life can be really impactful. So, one of the things that I offered to this young person was to say to them, remember that money is a tangible thing of the earth and it doesn't last forever. You can't take it with you when you die, and it's constantly trading hands. And so, what you have to understand perhaps is in that moment, that €100 didn't belong to you, it belonged to someone else. And you were the means to get that money into their hands. Not to say that thieves and con artists are the ones that should be getting all of our money. But I think it helps to know that if you feel that you have made any kind of foolish purchase, any kind of wrong decision, that first you learn from it, right? To look at it, to really look at it and analyze it honestly, and to prevent yourself from going in that direction again. I think that's really important. Sometimes I think with money, especially if we make a foolish choice or something doesn't turn out to be thoughtful and our best self, we can actually end up ignoring it and doing it over and over again because we don't want to be wrong. We don't want to feel shame. So remove the shame, find the lesson, change the course, and move forward. So I think those are very youthful ways of looking at money, and grown up ways of looking at money are going to be much more expansive and have the infusion of knowledge and experiences and increased value of things that are learned. Now, there are a lot of voices out there that are going to tell you the best way to spend your money. And just like anything in life, I think it's really important that you have a couple of trusted advisors, people that you've vetted and that you're just going to stick with no matter what, right? Even if it's not a perfect relationship, obviously, if you've had a lot of bad experiences with someone, they're not a trusted advisor. But if you feel fairly trusted and you feel like they have a trustworthy um, background and reputation, then stick with it. Even if it's not perfect, it's actually going to serve you better over the long run to be in communion with other people, in community with other people, than to try to go it alone in anything in life, especially where your finances are concerned. So, if you are in a place in life where you haven't put together that group of advisors, this is a really good time to think about that. So that would be my homework for you. The second point is to really look at who's around you advising you when it comes to financial decisions and who you can actually have a trusted conversation with. Now, the third section I want to talk about today has to actually do with love languages, because I think love and money can get very, very intertwined. We know that money is one of the biggest reasons that marriages break up. And we know that love is one of the biggest reasons why marriages occur. And so, why do love and money often conflict, often actually explode in a situation? What is it about money that is so very important? I think a lot of times we're talking about expectations, but more importantly, It's about love languages. So there is a book called The Five Love Languages that I reference quite often in my life because I feel like it for me it rings very true. If you haven't had a chance to look at the book, I do want to give you the author. His name is Gary Chapman, and the book is called The Five Love Languages: How to Express Heartfelt Commitment to Your Mate. But that can be to a friend, to a colleague, to those around you. It doesn't have to be to a spouse in particular. It can be your children, can be your neighbors. So let's go through the five love languages, and then we're going to talk about how money relates to them. So, words of affirmation is number one, acts of service is number two, receiving gifts is number three, quality time is number four, and physical touch is number five. And here's where I'm going to talk about money in terms of love and in terms of growing up, right? So, how do we bring abundance into our lives when it comes to these love languages? So, the first ones, words of affirmation. So, a lot of times people will use the pursuit of a career to earn money. I caution people about that, especially when I was teaching a finance class to my high school students, because a lot of kids will decide that my career is the career that's going to bring me the most money, right? With the biggest paycheck, with the greatest opportunity for growth and wealth accumulation. And I caution them about that because there are people who pursue their passion, who pursue the gifts and talents that they have, and they bring them to the highest level possible. And as a result of that, they are honored and they are rewarded, often but not always, through a monetary benefit, right? So, take, for example, someone who loves to sing. You know, there are a lot of singers in this world who probably are not singing because they feel like they could make money somewhere else. And then there are brave people who have had an honest evaluation of their talent, who have put in the time and the effort, who have honed their craft, who have been recognized and propelled forward, and they do reap a monetary benefit for that effort, that investment, and having that core talent, right? There are certain things that you may want to pursue and you can work really, really hard at them. But if that's not your God given talent, then you may actually find yourself working against the path of success instead of working toward it. And for those of us who are probably in this audience and a little bit more mature, we tend to be talking to people over the age of 50. You've discovered what talents and gifts you have, I hope by now, and you've discovered how investing in them benefits you or how leaving them aside may have left a hole in your life. It's never too late to try to invest in the gifts and talents that you have. All right. But you have to be able to discover those. And we can talk about that in a future podcast. Words of affirmation are often desired by those people who pursue careers for the sake of money because they believe that if they achieve, they're going to hear the words they need to hear, that they're enough, that they're talented, that they're the star, that they're amazing, all of the things that actually each and every human being is already. The one thing I want you to know that every single person on this planet was loved into existence, if not by their human parents, by their spiritual creator, right? Our human parents are a vehicle from which we come to this world. But there is an outside force, no matter what you call it, that is creative, that we have no control over whatsoever, even though we want to have control over it. And certainly science is pursuing control over it. Even the greatest minds in the world have not been able to identify that initial mover, that one thing that started it all, that keeps it going, right? We can break it apart, but we can't actually get to that answer. So I think it's important for us as grown-ups to acknowledge that each of us is here because we were loved into existence and that we have a purpose in this world, and all of us have value, no matter whether you're rich or poor, no matter your race, no matter your sex, no matter your country of origin, no matter whether you had loving parents or horrible parents. You are loved into existence with gifts and talents. And by discovering those gifts and talents and investing in them, you find longevity, happiness, success, abundance. That's the fountain. That's the fountain of youth, really, is being able to go into those places in your life and expand them. That is going to bring you so much longevity, so much joy, so much purpose because you're in the right place, and that will just propel you forward. So, did you pursue a career for those words? And is that sustainable in a career that you don't have passion for? If it's not, you may want to sit down, and you may have to sit down with your family and talk about it. Nothing is ever going to be perfect and everything is going to have obstacles, but the challenges should be things that you want to pursue, not things that you want to avoid. So just be able to recognize the connection between words of affirmation and money. Many people are pursuing careers to achieve power, success, and money so that they hear words of affirmation. Okay. The second one is acts of service. All right. People either want to be able to serve others or, honestly, to be served, right? There are people out there who desire, who yearn for people to help them, to accompany them, to walk with them. And in the absence of those people, they often earn money or take money and they hire people to do that because they don't have a strong enough belief that there are people around them who would be willing to do it otherwise. These are the people that you're going to see that what I call outsource a lot of their life. And again, there is no value judgment here. None of this is wrong. It's just good to recognize how we spend our money. These are the people that are going to go out and volunteer. These are the people who are going to take their money and start charities and invest in teaching. These are going to be people who take on teaching careers, perhaps other service careers. These are people who often become doctors and nurses and clerics. These are people, oh goodness, who hire people like gardeners and housekeepers and drivers and spend a lot of money on doctors and other practitioners and people who take care of their beauty, whether it's their hair, their nails, their skin. That there is a love of serving and being served, and that money is dedicated in that sphere. So I want you to again, we're growing up into our impression of money today, right? And we're really taking time to look at it and to ask ourselves where our love languages play a role in money. The third one is receiving gifts. And I'm going to say also giving gifts. There are people who just, please don't forget my birthday. If you forget my birthday, everything falls apart. And for other people, it's like, oh, I think my birthday was yesterday. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. I'm not counting anymore. Or you ask them, like, how old are you? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I stopped. Maybe 57, 58. I don't know. Something like that. Right. So it depends on their love language. Right. Do you look around your home and have a lot of souvenirs, right? Do you plan Christmas cards and Mother's Day cards and Thanksgiving cards and gifts? And do you like to make sure you bring gifts to people when you see them? Is that part of your love language? Do you hope for gifts from your closest relationship from friends, from employers, right? If your employer gives you a gift, is that a big reward for you? Are you looking at the benefits package of your employment as much as you're looking at the income, right? At your salary? For some people, they'll just say, just pay me. Like, I don't need all the bells and whistles. And for other people, having a job where they're given cars and vacations and allowances and different special things like tickets to sporting events or theater events, that all of that package plays a role into where money has value to them. It's in gifts, intangible gifts. And they often are the best gift givers, but they also are those who can feel a big hole in their life if they don't receive the gifts that they were really hoping for. In this world of self love that I'm seeing, there's a lot of messaging talking about give a gift to yourself, right? Gift yourself. Unfortunately, from a physiological standpoint, and we're talking about longevity right now, the hormones that come from someone actually giving you a gift, words of affirmation, spontaneously doing an act of service for you is different from when you take it yourself, right? Would anyone buy a designer handbag if there was no one to actually see it? Would it bring them as much joy as it would in a world where people acknowledge and appreciate and admire certain labels, certain styles, certain trends, certain exclusive things like country clubs and luxury cars, right? Things, all of those things, if that's where your money goes, right? If you put great value in labels and exclusivity and luxury, and not necessarily from a comfort standpoint, but from a label standpoint, does it have to come in the form of a gift? That could be a big part of your love language. And so you have to look at money and how it relates to that. And the reason I'm asking you to look at the love languages when it comes to money is that we don't want the love language to be fulfilled by money, something that's intangible, right? There are other things, other grown up things that we can do to actually infuse real value. And then we can actually look at our finances and make objective decisions that are actually going to serve us better, right? So it's better to not be in debt, but than it is to have a designer car or a luxury, or a designer bag or a luxury car, maybe. And there are a lot of people in the world today who are forfeiting some good financial decisions because they need to get gifts, right? And how they can fulfill that love language. So, just like you don't want to be in a job that you're not suited to get words of affirmation, you also don't want to live a life where you become a slave to your bills because the giving of gifts is your love language. And I know for some people, this is going to be a really hard exercise to look at, to deep down kind of acknowledge and see spending patterns and value patterns, because sometimes there's a hurt or a hole that we're trying to use money to fill, and that can be hard to look at. And so you can do this slowly, you can do this at your own pace, and I would advise that you do it with a trusted friend. This is can be an exercise that you can do alone for sure, but if you really feel like you need that support, then talk to them about it. Have you ever thought of money in terms of love languages? And I heard this concept over a podcast, and now I want to kind of pursue it with you. I think it could be a really fun long lunch time discussion or over a good coffee or a cup of tea, whatever brings you joy. All right, going on quality time. A lot of people pursue work, money, the creation of money, the inheritance of money. That's like a whole nother category we can talk about. That, love and inheritance are completely tied together. I hear all these horrible stories of people who, at the end of their life, were either really, really disappointed or hurt or in pain by this or the other relative that they thought would leave them an inheritance, or someone else got part of an inheritance. And certainly when there's big families, this can be extremely dividing of families, and it will affect your longevity and your health span and your lifespan. And there is a cost to that. So being able to detach and walk away is super important. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying that we know from a physical standpoint, an emotional health standpoint, that that can have an extremely negative effect on another human being. I know it's nearly impossible to do, but I often advise people to start actually giving away their wealth as they age. It's something that my grandfather did. There is something beautiful about being able to designate your what you have to where you want it to go, whether that's individuals or an organization, while you're still alive, to have even the joy of being able to pass that on while you're still living as opposed to after you pass. Um, and it gives time for conversation, right? If there's going to be disappointment or there's going to be misunderstandings, maybe those can be actually worked through while you're still living, as opposed to waiting for the chaos to potentially ensue after you're gone. I think clarity about inheritance is really, really important, or what your wishes are after you're gone. I think we spend a lot of time trying to get our wishes fulfilled during our lifetime. It's also important to have those wishes fulfilled um, after we pass. And honestly, I think this is something that anyone can start thinking about at any age. But certainly if you're over the age of 50, I think it's, you could live definitely another 50, 60. Now they're saying 70 years. But it is important, I think, as a mature individual, having lived 50 years, to start to think about that. I don't think before 50 you might have the emotional intelligence or the wisdom of life experience to think that far in advance and in that scope. But I do think that at 50 you have enough life experience and you have enough worldly understanding that you can start to go into those very difficult conversations with yourself first, and then with others. I think it's very valuable. So quality time, people often are buying time, right? They buy time through medications that extend life. They buy quality time in earning money or accumulating wealth so that they can stop working, right? So that they can have these long retirements filled with recreation, filled with passions, filled with joys, that whatever you would define quality time as, that would be the pursuit of your money. Look at that. Do you have vacation funds? Are you trying to retire early because you want to have these many, many, many years to get out of whatever it is that you don't like doing right now? I would say it's probably really important for you to reevaluate just how you're living, as opposed to just focusing on that quality time for the future. But also, if quality time is something that is a love language of yours, then to, you know, look at how you're getting to that quality time, and what that money is being set aside for, and to acknowledge it, right? To acknowledge that mm, the working hours are not as valuable as the recreational hours. And then the last love language is physical touch. And you might be kind of scratching your head and saying, like, well, what is it? Where's she going to go with physical touch and money? Right? Because this could go in a really negative direction. But I will say that throughout history, we know that people have pursued wealth, and we have things called dowries, right? We have, arranged marriages that are often based on a calculation of wealth, of comfort, of ability to provide. And a lot of that has to do, honestly, comes from a really genuinely positive place that one family wants to make sure that their offspring is going to be well taken care of with their new family. But I think today in our modern world where families and relationships and marriages are no longer prioritized, and there's a huge breakdown in that, and there's a breakdown in community, right? That it isn't necessarily the natural go to that people are either going to pursue, maybe a family life, or if they're going to pursue a single life, that it's somehow a single life in a community. Maybe that's a religious life or just a single person, living in community. I think we've become a nation, certainly, and we're becoming a world where the concept of community groups and families are not as valued as the individual. And then we have a world, right, full of all of these individuals making their own choices, setting their own rules, living their own way. And there's a lot of chaos out there, right? There's a lot of chaos that happens when everyone sets their own rules, as opposed to groups of people where everyone has to live in community. And it can be as small as a family or as large as a town. But the concept of living in community does go to physical touch, because does your money have value to the community that you live in, the people that you touch, right? So are you pursuing, is your money of value to the parts of your community? And I'm gonna end with a story that I learned from someone who had a very, very big family. They had 12 children. And one of the things the parents said to me early on, because I was an only child, was that you have to understand in a large family that it's never going to be equal, but it is going to be necessary. And what they meant by that was that the time, the relationships, and the money that was given in the family was given as needed and as necessary, not necessarily equal. Because at different times in a community, there will be a person or a part of the community that has a greater need. And that gives us an opportunity to be generous. First, to be grateful that we're not the person in need. I think that's really important to acknowledge that we've already received our piece. So if you're in a family of, say, 4 people and one person is sick, we hope the great thing that everyone wants to do is rally around the sick person and give them everything that they need. But I think in doing that, to prevent like resentment or misunderstandings about how we work together, it's important for us to realize and to be grateful that we're not the person who's sick and that we're given this really cool opportunity to help, which we know produces serotonin, produces dopamine, produces oxytocin. These are hormones that are longevity hormones. So the people who live the longest are actually the people who live in full state of gratitude and recognize the value of the things that they have when they see other people in need. And not to be kind of proud and to say, oh, I'm glad I'm not like them, right? I'm glad I'm not poor like them, or I'm glad I'm not sick like them. That's not the point. The point is to say, my mother used to say, oh, but for the grace of God go I, right? Like, oh, thank you that I'm not personally struggling with that today. But also thank you that you've shown me that I can see a need and step in the community, and maybe go back to the love languages, right? And offer a word of affirmation, an act of service, a gift, if that's something that you are able to do, some of your time, which has value, and even a physical touch, right? Healthy physical touches, holding someone's hand, looking at their eyes, touching their hair, giving them a hug, whatever is appropriate. But the idea is that when we're not the person in need, we are the person that's able to give. And that's how communities work. So, as grown-ups, now that we're talking about money and how it plays into longevity, I want you to, if you so choose, to look at the love languages and look at where your money lies and see if it reveals to you what your love languages are, and to make sure that those love languages are in order and serving you as well as you can. And then maybe it's time to reallocate those financial decisions. If you're not working with the end in mind, what's your goal, then do a little homework with that this week. That would also be a really great way to grow up into a positive financial position. But we've covered the two of the three big pillars of life. We've covered time, we covered money, and next week we're going to talk a little bit more about relationships and the value of relationships in our life. I'm Carrie Donegan. This was Radical Age Reversal, and I'll see you next week.